Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. Now, this is the second lecture in this new series I'm doing, Beyond Orion, and it's intended really for the members of the college only. I may release it at some later date on general YouTube, but I'm certainly not going to do so for a while. And so this one's really for those who have made the commitment and who have taken this a step further, because what we're going to go into now is some quite esoteric stuff and quite deep, actually. Taken me a long time to find all this out, and I think you'll find this an interesting lecture, and stick with it to the end because there's some surprises for you as we go along. Now, this one's called Beyond Orion Part 2, Orion and Heaven. Perhaps I should have said and hell as well. Anyway, I don't want to scare anyone. Orion and Heaven. Now, I hope you've all read the Orion mystery by now. If you haven't, well, I can recommend it. This is a book I co-authored with Robert Bovell in 1994, and it is actually really a cornerstone of a lot of what we are now doing and studying. This was a seminal work. I can't take I take some credit for the writing of it, but the discoveries made in that book are really Robert Bovell's, and extraordinary, and quite a genius actually to have unravelled all that. So anyway, but I've taken things a lot further into different directions since then. But this is the sort of bedrock book that you really should read if you haven't already. And I've just been looking on Amazon. You can actually pick up a hardback copy of this for only about £2 or £3, you know. It was £17 when it originally came out. Just shows you, you know, that there were an awful lot of them printed, so that's probably why. And I imagine that people liquidate, or someone dies and his books are left to people who don't know what they are and don't care, and they just want to get rid of them quickly and make a couple of quid. That's life, isn't it? Anyway, so there you go. Or you can buy it new, of course, from Amazon, and I think only the paperback edition's available. So in this book we talked about the shafts from the Great Pyramid, and a lot of other things. We'll mention some of them later on. The Great Pyramid has got 3 chambers to it. There's one underground, you can see going down below, and then there's 2 above ground. There's the Queen's Chamber, the lower one, and that has shafts. One points towards the star Sirius, and I'm not going to go into this in detail now because we talked about it before. And one goes to a little star called Kochab in Ursa Minor. Right, Ursa Minor is the Little Bear constellation. And that chamber's, we believe that within the Egyptian religion, this chamber was to do with the opening of the mouth ceremony and the sort of rebirth rituals performed on a mummy before it's before it's buried. Resurrection, it's representing the resurrection of Osiris, basically. And then the upper chamber is really, I would call it the chamber of Thoth, but they call it the King's Chamber. And that has 2 shafts as well, one pointed towards Thuban, the brightest star in the constellation of Draco. And this star was the North Star at the time of the Old Kingdom. So a very important star as far as the Egyptians are concerned. And the other shaft pointed up towards the culmination point in the southern sky of Orion's belt. So these shafts seem to have acted or symbolized acting as kind of channels for the soul to go on its journey to the appropriate stars, as long as they're aligned at just the right time. And we go into all of that in the Orion mystery. You can read it all there. Now, that's all very interesting. But we published that book in February of 1994, and I was amazed when in October 1994, same year, 7 months later, is it? movie Stargate came out. And I remember watching that for the first time in Manchester in a cinema there. I don't know. I can't remember why I was in Manchester. I think I was doing a promotional tour. I think to do with the Orion Mystery, the paperback or something. So I went along, and I was amazed that in this movie they were talking about how obviously it's fictional, but they were talking about how in the 1930s in this fiction, scientists or archaeologists have discovered this metal ring. Which they didn't know what it was or what it was for. They took it back to America, and after playing around with it for some decades, they eventually decoded what it could do, and found that if you turned it rather like the dial on an old-fashioned telephone, you could align various links on the outside, and it would set up a wormhole going to a specific planet. So intrepid explorers went through this wormhole, arrived on the planet, and discovered that there was a big pyramid there, just like there is here. But it's a very different planet in that the people there were all slaves of these Egyptian-type gods. There was a Ra there, and the other, bad guys, making the people work and not paying them and treating them like rubbish. Anyway, so that was the start of the whole Stargate saga, and a whole TV series that ran for 10 seasons, I think. I absolutely love Stargate SG-1, and I hope it comes back. But what was amazing to me was that the whole idea of these wormholes and these connections to other stars or star systems was very much what we'd been talking about with the Orion Mystery, and there were other things as well which were similar, which we'll talk a little bit about as we progress with this lecture. So before we go into that, I just want to say a few words about the main Egyptian gods. Excuse me. This is the family tree of the Heliopolis and Ennead. Ennead means 9. So there's 9 gods of the Heliopolis and Ennead, starting with Atum. And he's the father of the gods. He's the equivalent, you would say, of what we would call God the Father. He comes from nothingness. He is the creator of everything. We can't imagine, who he is or what he is, or we can only worship and obey this creator of this amazing universe that we find ourselves in. So he's the unknowable, invisible father of everything. Now he gives rise to 2 other gods, Shu and Tefnut, and they're sometimes called wind or air, as Shu, and water, fluid, Tefnut, the waters of the deep. And you can imagine the idea that imagine if you were living on the moon inside a dome. So the dome forms a skin that keeps what's inside separate from the space outside. Well, that's sort of how they imagined the Earth, had a sort of dome over it, which in the Bible is called a firmament. And the firmament separates the waters from without from the waters within. So they saw the whole world outside in space as being watery. So Tefnut is a sort of goddess of waters of the deep. So she and Shu are brother and sister, but also husband and wife. And they give rise to 2 other gods, Nut, and you see her called the sky goddess in many Egyptology books, but she's really the Milky Way. That's how we should really see her. And then we see Geb. Geb is the earth god, also called physicality. And out of those 2 are born 4 anthropomorphic gods. We have Osiris, we have Isis, we have Seth or Set, and we have Nephthys. And they are brothers and sisters, but they're also husbands and wives. So you've got Osiris and Isis, one husband and wife, and then you've got Set and Nephthys, another one. And they come to Earth because the Earth has been pleading with heaven to God because terrible things have been happening on Earth. Rather like in Stargate, where the people are being oppressed by bad gods, bad people doing things. The Earth has been invaded and bad things happening, and terrible wars being fought, bloodshed, awful giants, all sorts of nasty things, just like in the Bible it says. So they're sent to Earth to put things right. And Osiris establishes the rule of law in Egypt and teaches the people agriculture, civilized ways of doing things. His vizier is Thoth or Tahuti, who becomes Hermes in the later versions of Egyptian religion, Hermetica. And he teaches them how to read and write. That's Hermes does, Thoth. And so they established a good kingdom, well run with proper laws, proper justice, proper everything. But Set becomes jealous, that's the brother, and he wants to take over. So he murders his brother, Osiris, and chops the body up into parts and scatters them along the River Nile. And thinks that's it. And he takes over as being Pharaoh. Well, they don't call it Pharaoh at that time. They call it king, I think, or words to that effect. And he takes over. And that he thinks that's that. But Isis, the loving wife of Osiris, secretly gathers the parts of his body and ties them back together with bandages to make the first mummy. And then she appeals to Re Harakti, the sun god, and finds out his words of power. And she uses these to resurrect her husband, Osiris, comes back to life long enough that he can impregnate her. And then she gives birth to a god called Horus. And Osiris goes back to where he came from, goes back to the stars, to Orion. And Horus, the baby, Isis and Horus hide out, rather like Moses and the bulrushes. They hide out, in the papyrus groves of Lower Egypt, the Delta area, hiding from Set. And when Horus comes to age, he then challenges Set, and they have a long battle. It goes on for years. And in the course of the battle, Set rips out one of Horus's eyes and throws it into the sky. It becomes the moon. Meanwhile, Horus tears out Set's testicles, but also rips off a leg and throws that in the sky, where it becomes the constellation of the Plough, or the Big Dipper, as you would call it in America. Anyway, the battle goes on, and eventually the other gods have to intercede, and there's some kind of settlement happens, where there's a kind of joint rulership. And that's how things are left. And the future pharaohs, after Horus passes, future pharaohs, when they're alive, they're Horus. They're called Horus, and his spirit that supposedly runs them, as it were. They take on his role. After they die, they have to be mummified and go through rituals to resurrect them, and then they can go to Orion to join Osiris in his heavenly region. But we'll go into that a bit more as we go on with this. Now, this is we're going to start here with the zodiac of Dendera, which is quite recent, 1st century BC. And that was done at the time of Cleopatra. And so it has kind of Greek influences as well as Egyptian. But I'll briefly tell you that, looking at it here, you've got these 12 figures around the outside holding it up. 8 of them are hawk-headed, and those would represent sons of Horus, representing the 4 directions, although they're doubled up. They represent the four directions: north, south, east, and west. And then you've got four female figures, probably representing Nut, the sky goddess, holding up the sky. And then within that disc, you've got on the outer edge of it, you've got these various figures walking along. And they represent the decans, and each one represents 10 degrees of the circle around what's rising in the east and culminating in the south and setting in the west. So the decan rulers, each one 10 degrees, takes 1 degree rises every 4 minutes. So you've got 360 degrees to give you the 24 hours. And so each decan rules what's happening for 40 minutes. And they had prayers for them, and they would know when to cast the spells with the right decan rising, all that kind of magical stuff, which is probably hocus pocus, but that's how they, at least later on, that's how they used the decans. And then within that area, you've then got a lot of symbols for constellations. Some of them are zodiacal, as we would call it, the signs of the zodiac, and others are other signs which are also important. And we're going to, first of all, we're going to look at the ones in the center which represent the polar region around the North Pole. So if we look here in detail, we can immediately see there's this hippo in the middle here, this big hippo, pregnant hippo, and then you've got a leg of beef down the bottom there, and you've got other things. I'll put names to them now. So you've got the hippo goddess, it's called Tuat, and that's part of what we would now call the constellation of Draco. And one of the important things is the pole star. You see she holding a hand out, and there's a kind of thing like an umbrella, a folded up umbrella or a knife or something. Where that hand is where the pole star would have been. A star called Thuban, Alpha Draconis, we would call it. That was the North Pole star at the time of the Old Kingdom. But of course it's changed now, and we now have a different star there, one called Polaris, which is in the tail of the little bear. Interestingly, the little bear is shown above the head of the hippo goddess. Got little bear there shown as some kind of jackal figure, probably called Upawalt actually. And then you've got a Horus-headed figure. Does it represent Cassiopeia? Quite possibly, or maybe it's just a Horus figure for some other reason there. And then we got the tail of Draco as another of these jackals of the north. And then we have the plough, as I said, or the Big Dipper as this leg of beef, the foreleg of the bull, which is ripped out by Horus in their battle and thrown into the sky. So those are the major constellations of the northern sky, and we'll return to them a bit later in other situations. So if we come back now to our zodiac, we've then got the Duat region, the heavenly region of the sky, and we're going to look at that in some detail now. Now we've got a collection of constellations here, and I'm going to tell you what they all are. First of all, in the top part of this picture, we've got some constellations of the zodiac. We've got Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. And I'll be telling you sort of later on in other lectures how the Stargate, so-called, is in between Taurus and Gemini, above the head of Orion. We'll be talking about that in later lectures, so that's why I've included them there. Below, you've then got Orion, and he's shown here striding along. He's holding a staff in one hand, and he's called Sah, or Sahu, in ancient Egyptian. Very important constellation, as we'll see. And on the left side, we've got a sort of seated cow, which is how they saw Canis Major, which is the great dog. And above the figure between the two horns is a star, which is Sirius. And that's the star we've just seen of Isis. And in between that, we've actually got a planet shown there, but it doesn't say which one it is. But we know that's a planet. It's a hawk with a crown on, and it's standing on this thing that looks like a bomb. And why it's there, I'm not sure. But anyway, there's a planet there in between Orion and Canis Major. Now we're going to look at another ceiling, and this one belonged to a king called Seti I, who was the father of Ramesses II. And that's in 1280 BC. Now, interestingly, in the New Kingdom time, they seem to want to accommodate Set. They saw him as a ruler of deserts and barren areas, and that they needed to deal with the negative as well as the positive, or something to that. So Set is actually named after Seti. Make of that what you will. But interestingly, in his ceiling, he's included the northern constellations very clearly, very strongly. We're going to look at those now. And here you can see we've got again the hippo, the pregnant hippo, and sitting on her back is a crocodile. So this crocodile represents an entity that's riding the hippo. And I'll come back to that a bit later. And you see there's the hippo Draco. There's the North Pole again, where her hand comes out and joins that vertical umbrella or whatever it is. That's Thuban, Alpha Draconis. Actually, the arrow's not quite going as far as it should to the actual hand. And then we got Set is shown as a bull, Ursa Major. So not just the leg of the bull, perhaps because Set likes Set. Seti likes Set. He's shown him as a full-on bull. Ursa Major. And then we've got this Horus figure opposing Set. Is he representing Cassiopeia there? He's certainly got his arms in the W form. I don't know, and I'm not sure. But he's certainly a Horus figure. So he's opposing Set. And then we have another figure in a sort of pharaoh's fighting position with arm raised, and he's fighting the crocodile. So this, I think, is possibly somehow connected with Orion, who often is shown with his arm raised. But we'll see that in later lectures. But anyway, what we can tell from this is that the northern region is a dangerous place where you've got pregnant hippos, and hippos are very, very dangerous, especially when they've got young around. And crocodiles, also extremely dangerous, and this crocodile's riding on the back of the hippo, and a man fighting a crocodile. And we got Set as a bull, and he seems to be ruling over this area. So that's the northern region of the sky. And then we have the southern region, the Duat, and here we see Isis, Orion and Sirius, which would be Osiris and Isis, but we'll see that in a minute. Now notice in the bottom right-hand corner here, there's a lot of plaster that's peeled off the ceiling, so we've lost parts of the imagery, which is a great shame, you know, that most of it's been preserved extremely well, but in that one corner there, perhaps damp or something has caused the plaster to come away, and so we've lost that bit. However, fortunately, I think in the 19th century, these figures were recorded, so we do know what was there. And we can see here that we got Orion in his little boat, and you can see 3 stars there next to him. He's holding an anchor up to a star, and he's holding a staff. And above him is a symbol with 2 uprights with what look like flags or balloons or something, and one lying down also with a balloon or something. That spells Sahu, and there's a star under it to tell us that this is a star or constellation, group of stars there. And so that is telling us that this figure is actually meant to represent Orion. And then we have the lady in the bark, and she's pointing upwards at, first of all, we've got this bun and little pyramid, which spells Supid, which means Sirius. So we've got Sirius there, and then other hieroglyphs, another bun and this kind of lozenge and the throne, which spells Ust, which means Isis. The bun and the lozenge is Ust, and the throne is also represents Isis. So it's telling us that Isis and Sirius are kind of conjoined in this figure here. And then behind them we have three hawk-headed figures in their boats, and they are the planets, Jupiter, Saturn and Mars. Now I'll just say here for a minute that the solar system itself is Horus the greater, the larger. You hear it. There's Horus the boy, or the younger Horus, who is the son of Isis and Osiris as people on the planet, and he becomes the king. But there's also Horus the elder, which represents the whole solar system, and that solar system is born from Orion and Sirius, or it's born from Orion but has connections with Sirius. So, but we'll come into that in later lectures. So these planets are hawk-headed because they belong to the Horus solar system, and they represent Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, and I'm not absolutely sure which is which. I think the one in front is Mars, but I might be wrong there, and the other two are Saturn and Jupiter, but I'm not sure in which order. Now we have another ceiling, which is a couple of hundred years earlier, which is from Senmut, who was the vizier to Queen Hatshepsut. Now, it's very rare for the Egyptians to have a queen rather than a male pharaoh. And Hatshepsut was the exception because of certain circumstances at the time. So she became pharaoh, and she had a vizier. A vizier is the first minister, prime minister you could call him. And it's also thought, well, he was an architect, it was also thought that he was her lover. Maybe that's not true, I don't know. But anyway, he had himself built a mausoleum nearby to her most important temple, which is the temple to Hathor. Hathor is another version of the cow goddess, which is identified with Canis Major, but we'll come to that as well. And very similar to Isis in many respects. Anyway, he had himself a mausoleum built there. I suppose he was intending to be buried there, but he wasn't, in fact. Either he'd fallen out of favour, or maybe something happened to him and his body fell in the Nile or something, got eaten by crocodiles, I don't know. But anyway, he built a magnificent mausoleum there with a tremendous ceiling on it, and we're going to look at that a bit now. And first of all, again, we're going to look at the polar region of the sky, where we see these glyphs. Now, first of all, we've got the hippo goddess Tuat again, who's equated with the constellation of what we would call Draco. And notice again, she's got this crocodile riding on her back. So Tuat has been occupied by crocodiles. Make of that what you will, but perhaps we're talking about reptilians or something like that living there. Dangerous beasties anyway. And then we got the pole star Thuban, where her hand is holding that umbrella or knife. Perhaps a knife would be better. That's the pole star around which the skies turn. So it is actually a sort of gateway in a way. And then we've got the little bear being held in her other hand. So she has control over the little bear as well. And then we've got Set in the guise of the Great Bear constellation in Egyptian myth, the foreleg of the bull. Now, interestingly, they've drawn it here. It's not just the leg of the bull, but they've also put a head and horns on it and little legs. So Set is shown as a complete bull although he's also the foreleg of the bull. It's a rather clever way of imaging that. And you can see here the Horus solar system is at war with Set. So Horus is fighting Set. That's what this is telling us about. That the Earth, well, the solar system, is in conflict with the Great Bear. Now, isn't that interesting? And that also the other northern region stars, Thuban and the constellation of Draco, is also taken over by some kind of entities, we could call them, I guess, which are like crocodiles, very dangerous. So the whole theme of this northern part of the sky, is that this is the region of Set, the region to do with the enemies of Horus. Now we have the sepulchral ceiling back here again. This is one of Senmut, the vizier, and we're going to look now at the other side of the sky, the Orion-Sirius region. We're going to focus on just those two. You can see actually just behind that there's another two planets, but we don't need to care about them. We're going to look at this bit. And here you can see again, we got Orion in his boat, and you can see 3 stars of Orion's belt. And you can see behind him is Sirius as Isis. And it tells us that again in the hieroglyphs above, and we'll come to them in a minute. And then we've got Pleiades there. I think it's the Pleiades shown as this oval just to the right of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Those are probably the Pleiades. It might be the Hyades, both in Taurus anyway. And then we've got Milky Way, South Branch, and we've got Milky Way, the North Branch. So these streams of stars. And the other ones, well, it's debatable. I mean, I think people are still working on all of this as to what these all represent. But we're going to focus on this bit and try to decode it as best we can. Now, before we do that, in the Book of the Dead, it tells us some information which is very useful. It says, they are against me. I open the door in heaven. I rule upon the throne. Right? This is part of the ritual to do with the rebirth and ascension of Ani, who's trying to go to heaven. So I open the door. The word for star is Sabah. Right? So what they're translating is, and then next to that, inside this red ring here, you can see this open sort of rectangle with an entrance to it. That represents, they use that symbol a lot. It can represent a room, it can represent a temple, it can represent all sorts of things. But what's important here is the doorway. So he says, I open the door in heaven, in pet. That is a symbol for heaven, and they've got a P and T there. So the door in heaven, what he's calling a door, is actually Sabah, which means star, and an entrance. And I think the correct word for that is the Stargate. So it's actually talking about opening a Stargate in heaven. And then he says, I rule upon the throne. The throne is Nusset. And we got this symbol there of what is actually called a jar stand in the hieroglyphs, but that is also represents a throne. So those hieroglyphs together mean Neset, and it's connected with the throne of Osiris. So he's opening the door in heaven so he can go and rule upon the throne of Osiris. He wants to become one with Osiris, in other words. Now, if we see the same, we're going to see the same thing here from these hieroglyphs from the ceiling of Senmut. First of all, we got the goddess Isis, Sirius Isis. Yeah, well, I've explained that. The pyramid with the bun is Sepet, and then you got the throne, and you got the another bun and the kind of lozenge thing. That's ust, and it's been repeated as well. So we got Isis there in Sirius, and interestingly, Sirius rises behind Orion. Just like to point out here that Orion comes up on its side, and the side with the holding the staff comes up first, and then the figure comes up, and then after him rises Sirius. So she rises behind him, and if we look here, we see that if you're going from right to left is the rising. So the lower part of Orion rises first, and then the upper part of Orion, and then you have the rising of Sirius coming behind him. Now, we also have here symbols representing Orion as a constellation, not just the hieroglyph, but as a constellation, and they show these collection of stars, and it's actually not quite how Orion looks, but near enough. And you've got dust clouds in it, and so the stars of Orion. Now you have to ask yourself, well, how did the Egyptians know that there are dust clouds in Orion? Because there are. You've got the Great Nebula in the Sword of Orion, and we'll be talking a lot about that in later lectures. You've also got dust clouds around the very large star Alnitak. It's actually a pair of stars. And then you've got another set of dust clouds around the star called Scythe, which is in the, well, if you're looking at it in the sky, it's the right hand knee or foot. And you've got the Horsehead Nebula there. And these are very beautiful to look at through telescopes, and we've got the Hubble images, and I expect you've seen pictures of them before. But how did the Egyptians know that there are dust clouds in Orion? It's all very, very strange. Anyway, so dust clouds in Orion. Now we're going to go through the other hieroglyphs. We're going to start on the left-hand side here, which is the upper part of Orion, and then we're going to move to the lower side. So those hieroglyphs there tell us we're looking at the upper part of Orion, and then we see what's in the upper part of Orion? The family of Horus. We've got a figure representing the family or sons of, and then we've got a hawk here for Horus. And then we have here hieroglyphs saying Arat, meaning a gateway. We've got a symbol that represents the mouth, among other things. You've got a star. So there's a gateway, Stargate there, there's a star there, the gateway star. Right, so it's in the upper part of Orion, it's saying. And what have we got there? We have the eye of Horus, i.e. the sun. Now that's very important as well, because, and we're going to talk about this, I have talked about it before, and you may have seen lectures on it, but Orion holds up his hand to the Stargate, which is where the ecliptic, the pathway of the sun, crosses over the median plane of the Milky Way. So once a year, the sun is positioned exactly on that point. So the sun can actually be at the Stargate. And we have the conception that the Pharaoh travels in the bark of the sun. The sun takes him with him on a journey, and he takes him to Osiris, to where he's going to join Orion. So the sun would actually move on its journey through the sky, arrive at the Stargate. That's when the Pharaoh can jump out, or anyone else who's with him on the sun's bark, and they go to Orion, and then they can go to the court of Osiris. So that's kind of what that's talking about. And the sun, the eye of Horus is the sun, so that must be when the sun is positioned at the Stargate, and that's when the sons of Horus, are in the upper part of Orion. It's telling us that. Now we've got a repetition of two collections of hieroglyphs here, which represent the throne, the top one. We saw that symbol earlier in the piece from the Book of the Dead, That jar stand represents Neset, which means throne. The throne is in the lower part of Orion, it's telling us. And what's in the lower part of Orion? Well, first of all, we got Osiris. The eye over the throne is the symbol for Osiris. Right, Osset. And what else is in the lower part of Orion? Again, we got the family of Horus, but now as stars. So the sons of Horus have become stars in Orion, is what that's talking about, as companions of Osiris. And who are the sons of Horus? Well, actually, they're us. Sorry, you couldn't see those. The sons of Horus are us. They are we have the four Hori, so-called, which are represented often as Dushabti figures, representing the four directions, the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. But they also represent the four tribes of man. And what are the four tribes of man? Well, it's the four primary races. You've got the white race, you've got the black race, you've got the red race, and you've got the pale or yellow race. So those are, we've also discussed that in terms of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four horses, the white, the black, the red, and they sometimes call it green, but it should really be yellow or pale. Those are the horses, those are the tribes of man. And unfortunately, they're being ridden by riders who are demonic spirits who make use of mankind to do terrible things. And that's why we have evil in the world. But that's going to be sorted out in the course of the apocalypse. That's what we're told. So we have the same thing here, that the descendants of the four tribes, of the four primary tribes, all of them have the possibility of going to heaven. Yeah? It doesn't matter who you are, you have that possibility. But you need to graduate and to have done the right things and be a good person to get there. This is what this is all about. So the sons of Horus are actually graduates from planet Earth who are able to go to Orion. You can call them ascended masters if you like. I don't know exactly what grade you have to be, but they're the saints, as we would call them in Christianity. They're the saints, and they are able to go to Orion. So we have here Osiris, who's the ruler of the dead, and he's said to dwell in Orion, as we've seen. And we have behind him his two sisters, Isis and Nephthys. And Nephthys is the one who's nearest to us, with this curious thing on her head with a kind of dish. And Isis is sort of behind us from our perspective, and she's got this little throne on her head, which symbolises Isis. So they're behind him, and which is true because they rise after Osiris. They're kind of like, almost like they're pushing him up to resurrect. And then we have the sons of Horus, i.e. humans from the solar system, who've ascended to Orion and the court of Osiris. So they've risen, those are the risen saints, gone to heaven, gone to Orion, to Osiris. Now, I'm just quickly going to show you that we've been going back. We've been to the New Kingdom. We started off with Cleopatra, which was Ptolemaic, almost Roman times. Then we went to New Kingdom. Now we're Old Kingdom. And the Old Kingdom also was very into Orion. And this is the basis of the Orion mystery, which I wrote with Robert Bauval, that the three pyramids were meant to represent Orion's belt. Now, for some reason, Egyptologists won't accept this. They think, they think it's daft. They think it's pyramidicity. They've got their own pet theories and they don't want to hear about anything different. But I ask you, you just superimpose the two pictures and exact. It's not make-believe, they're exact. And to me, that visual evidence is all you need to really know. It's there. And we know also, we've just been looking at it, how the Egyptians held Osiris in great esteem, and they believed he was connected with Orion. So would it be any surprise that they would build pyramids to represent these important stars of Orion's belt as a kind of cosmic link? Not at all. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So I leave this with you, that the Egyptians knew what they were talking about, and they certainly had reasons for building pyramids other than just burying a body. I'm not saying that they didn't put bodies in them. Maybe they did. We haven't found them if they did, but that's not everything. But certainly the pyramids themselves represent the region of heaven. So it's not so much a cemetery as a representation on earth of what they believed is going on in heaven, that the people's bodies are buried near to the pyramids, just as their souls have gone to Orion. That's kind of what this is saying to me. So we got here these shafts. We were looking at these earlier, and we got some shafts which are pointing north. Now, we have the Ursa Minor one from the Queen's Chamber and Sirius in the other direction. So one direction links with the opening of the mouth, waking the person up and bringing them back to life. This is what this is all about. Sirius being like Isis. Isis brings Osiris back to life. And then we got the King's Chamber, where we have the choice, the weighing of the heart. I call this the Chamber of Thoth or Tahuti. It's the equivalent of that weighing of the heart scene. And you have a choice. You either go to Thuban, which was the North Star at the time of pyramids were built. And remember, this Draco, the hippo goddess, is being ridden by the crocodile. So when you go up there, if you go there, you're going to encounter these entities, the crocodile entities, that inhabit that area of the sky. Or you can go the other way, up to Orion, which is the preferred way, when you will no doubt and hopefully go and join Osiris, the good god who came to Earth, or whose representation came to Earth, his projection, to establish the rule of law and order on Earth. That's where you want to go. That's heaven. So you've got a choice, heaven or hell. And we'll see it again here. In this papyrus, again from the New Kingdom, starts on the left. You have Anubis, who's kind of a god of the dead, leading the soul in, and the soul is now going to be judged. And it's weighed in the balances, and there's a little jar representing the heart in one side of the balances, and a feather of truth or mat, the law, in the other balance. And you have to weigh against that to decide whether you are worthy to go on to the court of Osiris. If you aren't, there is this monster, this crocodile-headed monster, which represents, I think, Tuat with the crocodiles, who's going to gobble you up if you fail the test. And you'll end up going to Thuban and to that bad hell place where you don't want to be. The alternative is pass the test. Thoth writes down the result. He's the ibis-headed god, it's shown here with a pen and paper, I suppose, or whatever it is. And he's going to inscribe in the book of life the result of your weighing against the feather of truth. And then you have this hawk-headed god, who I think is possibly Re Herakte, the sun god, taking you to Osiris, to the Stargate, above the hand of Orion. The whole thing about the boat, and he's taking you there. And then you can go into Orion, to the kingdom of Osiris, where there are, as we saw earlier, the 4 sons of Horus standing on the lotus, representing the different tribes of mankind. And we got the eye of Horus, the sun, waving a feather over the Osiris. So it's all very clear. It's going to be heaven or hell. So here we have some ascension texts in the Old Kingdom texts, which are from some of the pyramids, inscribed actually on the walls of pyramid texts. And they say things like, the king is a star. The king is a star which illuminates the sky. O king, you are this great star, the companion of Orion. Behold, he, the king, has come as Orion. Behold, Osiris has come as Orion. So there we have it, in black and white, exactly what the Egyptian religion, at least in its purest form, was all about. It was about good and evil. It was about the fact also that there is a war going on in heaven, and we're caught up in the middle of it. Solar system is fighting. It's fighting the plough, the Great Bear, and these northern constellations, and the Great Bear representing Set. That's Satan, you know. So we also have representatives of the bad guys in Draco. Isn't it interesting? We call it Draco, the dragon. Got the dragon there. And the Egyptians understood, you know, that there is this reptilian presence in that Draco part of the sky. And interestingly, in the Christian mysteries, when Jesus dies and he's in his tomb, we're told that, first of all, he visited hell to free the souls who are trapped there. Remember that? Well, where do you think he went? I think he went up there to that area up there of Thuban and Draco and all of those, to allow those souls to come out from there, to come back to Earth. Now, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? And then we had 2,000 years of Christianity for those souls to repent and repair their ways under the new dispensation. This is what I think anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but the idea that these souls who are trapped in hell can come back, and look what, you know, we've had this population explosion. There's, you know, more people on Earth now than ever before, far more. And it's like these souls are being allowed to come back to have another go, having seen what hell's like, and to repent and do good and see if they can graduate and go to heaven. And then after the 2,000-year period, that's why we've had this long gap, I think. It's to give us time to digest the new dispensation that's happened. They have the chance to repent over the 2,000, maybe number of lives to do that, to get to a position where they can go to heaven at the end of days, which is where we are now. But we'll be talking about that in more detail with Stargates and things in another lecture. So there we have it, I think. And the Egyptians, as I've said before, I believe that the Egyptian religion, the Osiris religion anyway, is the prequel to the Bible. It's the prequel, and it's telling us about the wars in heaven. It's telling us about how Osiris came to Earth and set about trying to regenerate things here, but it didn't fully succeed. It was a first attempt, and then there's been a second attempt through the Old Testament and then into the New Testament to free the earth from the demonic spirits which have taken it over. And that's where we're at now. We're in the midst of that last day's battle. So I hope you enjoyed this. As I say, this is advanced stuff we're doing now. Advanced. And keep with it. It's a lot more to come, and it's going to be very exciting, very interesting as we put the puzzle together and we begin to see what's what. And then you won't be in any doubt. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again.